On a cold February morning in 2013, inside one of Los Angeles' oldest and most mysterious hotels, a discovery would begin a chain of events that would capture global attention for years. The building was not new to strange stories. It stood in the heart of downtown Los Angeles, a place where history, tragedy, and unanswered questions had quietly collected for nearly a century. The Cecil Hotel, opened in 1924, carried a complicated reputation. Over the decades, it had witnessed financial decline, disappearances, deaths, and countless stories that blurred the line between coincidence and mystery. But in early 2013, the case that emerged from its walls would become different from anything before it. It would not begin with a crime scene. It would begin with a video, a mysterious surveillance recording from an elevator. A young woman named Elisa Lam had traveled from Canada to California alone. She was 21 years old, a university student with an interest in writing, photography, and exploring new places. To those who knew her, she was described as intelligent, creative, and thoughtful. She documented parts of her journey online, sharing moments from her trip and writing about her experiences. But during her stay in Los Angeles, something changed. On January 31, 2013, Elisa Lam disappeared. At first, her disappearance seemed like a missing person case. Her family became concerned when they could no longer reach her. The hotel staff was contacted. Authorities began searching. Her belongings were found inside her room at the Cecil Hotel, but there was no clear explanation for where she had gone. The situation became more confusing because of one detail. There was a final known piece of footage. A surveillance camera inside one of the hotel elevators had recorded Elisa Lam shortly before she vanished. The video lasted only 4 minutes, but those 4 minutes would become one of the most analyzed pieces of footage on the internet. The recording shows Elisa entering the elevator alone. She steps inside, presses several buttons, and appears to wait. At first, nothing seems unusual. She stands near the control panel, looking out into the hallway. Then, the atmosphere begins to shift. She moves toward the corner of the elevator. She looks outside. She appears to react to something beyond the camera's view. She steps out. Then she quickly returns. For several moments, Elisa appears to move in ways that viewers found difficult to understand. She gestures with her hands, leans against the wall, and repeatedly looks into the hallway as if she is communicating with someone unseen. The elevator doors remain open. They do not close. The scene continues. To millions who later watched the footage, those unanswered moments became the center of the mystery. Who was Elisa looking at? Was someone else there? Was she afraid? Or was there another explanation hidden within the circumstances surrounding her final hours? Before the video reached the public, investigators were focused on a much simpler question. Where was Elisa Lam? The search continued for days. Guests staying at the Cecil Hotel began reporting strange issues involving the building's water supply. Some complained about unusual water pressure. Others mentioned changes in the taste or appearance of the water. At the time, nobody knew how important those details would become. The hotel had a rooftop area containing large water tanks. These tanks supplied water to parts of the building. They were not easily accessible, and reaching them required entering restricted areas. On February 19th, nearly 3 weeks after Elisa disappeared, a hotel employee went to inspect the rooftop tanks after complaints from guests. What they found changed the investigation completely. Elisa Lam's body was discovered inside one of the hotel's rooftop water tanks. The discovery raised immediate questions. How did she get there? How could she have entered the restricted rooftop area? How did she end up inside a tank that was several feet above the ground? And perhaps the question that troubled many people most. Why did the elevator footage show her acting so strangely? The investigation became a collision between official findings and public curiosity. Authorities examined the circumstances surrounding Elisa's death. The Los Angeles County coroner later ruled the death as accidental drowning, with bipolar disorder identified as a significant contributing factor. Investigators suggested that Elisa may have experienced a mental health episode and entered an area she was not supposed to access. The possibility was that she climbed into the tank herself and was unable to escape. But for many people who watched the elevator footage, that explanation did not feel complete. The questions continued. The rooftop area was considered restricted. The tank lids were heavy. The circumstances surrounding her final movements were difficult for many viewers to understand. And because the elevator footage had been released publicly by investigators, millions of people began examining every second, searching for details that might explain what happened. The video spread rapidly. People slowed it down. They analyzed her movements. They studied the elevator doors. They examined the hallway behind her. Every gesture became a possible clue. The internet created theories at a speed that traditional investigations could never match. Some suggested another person was involved. Others believed the footage showed evidence of something hidden. Some focused on the timing of the elevator behavior, questioning whether Elisa appeared to be reacting to a threat. Others looked deeper into her personal history, her mental health, and the possibility that her actions were connected to something happening internally rather than externally. The case became a modern example of how digital evidence can transform an investigation. A single surveillance recording turned a private tragedy into a worldwide mystery. But the more people searched for answers, the more complicated the story became. The Cecil Hotel itself added another layer. For years, the building had been associated with unsettling events. Its history included deaths, disappearances, and stories that contributed to its reputation as one of Los Angeles's most infamous hotels. Because of that history, some people believed the location itself played a role. Others argued that the hotel's reputation influenced how people interpreted the case. A place known for tragedy naturally creates a different reaction when another tragedy occurs within its walls. The question became not only what happened to Elisa Lam, but also why this particular case captured the imagination of so many people. Perhaps it was because the footage felt incomplete. Perhaps it was because the final moments of a person's life had been recorded but remained difficult to understand. Or perhaps it was because the case existed in an uncomfortable space between certainty and doubt. The official investigation reached a conclusion, but public curiosity continued. Years later, Elisa Lam's story would return to the spotlight when renewed attention brought the case back into public discussion. The same elevator footage that first created the mystery would once again be viewed by millions. And once again, people would ask the same questions. Was the answer already visible in those few minutes of video? Or had everyone been looking at the wrong mystery all along? Because the deeper investigators and online researchers looked, the more they discovered that Elisa Lam's final days contained details that were not as simple as they first appeared. Her journey to Los Angeles, her stay at the Cecil, her disappearance, the rooftop, the water tank, and the strange elevator recording that started a global mystery. All of these pieces formed a story where fact and interpretation existed side by side. And to understand what happened, the timeline had to be examined carefully, because the most important clues were hidden not only in what was seen, but also in what was missing. The timeline of Elisa Lam's final days becomes important because every small decision, every recorded moment, and every gap in information creates a clearer picture of the events leading up to her death. Before she arrived at the Cecil Hotel, Elisa had been traveling through California as part of a solo trip. She had planned her journey carefully, moving between locations and sharing parts of her experience online. Her posts showed someone who was curious about the world around her, someone who wanted to explore and document what she saw. But beneath those ordinary travel updates, there were also signs that she had been struggling with her mental health. Elisa had previously spoken publicly about living with bipolar disorder and depression. These details became important after her death because investigators considered whether her condition may have influenced her actions during her final hours. However, understanding someone's mental health history is not the same as explaining every action they take. That distinction became one of the central challenges of the case. After arriving at the Cecil Hotel, Elisa was initially placed in a shared room. Reports indicate that she was later moved to a private room after complaints from other guests about unusual behavior. The exact details of what happened inside the hotel during those days have remained a subject of discussion. Some accounts described her as acting strangely. Others suggested that nothing appeared unusual. Like many investigations, the truth existed between different perspectives, with each person observing only a small part of a much larger situation. On January 31st, the day Elisa disappeared, she was expected to check out of the hotel and continue her travels. But she never completed that plan. When she failed to contact people close to her, concerns grew. Her family reported her missing, and the search began. The Los Angeles Police Department investigated the hotel. Officers searched the building. Areas around the property were examined, but Elisa was not found. For several days, there was no clear evidence explaining where she had gone. Then, investigators released the elevator surveillance video. And everything changed. The footage was not released because it was mysterious. It was released because authorities hoped someone might recognize Elisa's movements, or provide information about where she went afterward. But, instead of immediately solving the disappearance, the video created a new wave of questions. Viewers around the world noticed details that investigators had already considered. The elevator doors, the button panel, Elisa's movements, the hallway, the timing. One of the most discussed parts of the footage was the elevator itself. The doors remained open for an unusually long period. Some viewers wondered if Elisa had pressed a button that prevented the doors from closing. Others questioned whether the elevator system itself was malfunctioning. Technical explanations suggested that certain elevator designs can behave differently depending on button inputs or safety features. The strange appearance of the footage was also influenced by the camera system. The surveillance recording had been slowed in some versions, creating a more dramatic feeling. The time display appeared inconsistent because portions of the footage were edited or processed before release. Small technical details that might normally be ignored became major points of analysis. This is what made the case so unusual. A normal investigation usually relies on private evidence, interviews, forensic reports, physical clues, and official records. But this case unfolded in public. Millions of strangers became amateur investigators. Every frame was examined. Every possibility was debated. Some people focused on the possibility that Elisa was hiding from someone. They pointed to the moments where she looked into the hallway. They believed her gestures suggested fear or communication. But another interpretation was that Elisa may have been experiencing confusion, paranoia, or disorientation. People experiencing a mental health episode can sometimes behave in ways that appear unusual to outside observers, especially when viewed without the context of their thoughts or emotions. The difficulty was that nobody watching the video could know what Elisa was experiencing at that moment. The camera recorded her actions. It did not record her mind. This gap between what was visible and what was unknown became the foundation of the mystery. Then came the question of the rooftop. The area where the water tanks were located was not a normal guest space. Access required reaching a restricted part of the building. This led many people to wonder how Elisa could have gotten there alone. Investigators examined the physical layout of the hotel. They considered possible routes. They looked at the condition of the rooftop area. They examined the water tank. The official conclusion was that Elisa likely accessed the roof, entered the tank, and died accidentally. But many online discussions continued to focus on details they felt were difficult to explain. For example, some questioned how the tank cover was positioned. Others wondered how someone could enter the tank without assistance. These questions became central points in internet investigations. However, investigators also noted that people can sometimes accomplish unexpected actions during moments of distress, especially when influenced by fear, confusion, or altered perception. The human mind, under extreme conditions, does not always behave in predictable ways. The case became a study in how people interpret incomplete information. When an event feels impossible to understand, the human brain naturally searches for patterns. It looks for hidden connections. It tries to complete the story. And in Elisa Lam's case, the missing pieces were everywhere. The elevator video ended before showing what happened next. There were no eyewitnesses who could explain her movements. No recording captured her arrival on the rooftop. No final message explained what she was thinking. The most important moments were the moments nobody saw. This uncertainty allowed many theories to develop. Some theories involved another person being present. Others suggested the possibility of a hidden crime. A few theories became connected to the strange history of the Cecil Hotel itself. But the challenge with theories is that they require evidence. A possibility can exist without being proven. A question can remain unanswered without automatically pointing toward a different explanation. This was the balance investigators and journalists had to maintain. Because behind the mystery was a real person. Elisa Lam was not just a case file or an internet puzzle. She was a daughter, a friend, a young woman whose final moments became watched and analyzed by millions of people. The worldwide attention also created a difficult conversation about privacy. The elevator footage showed a person during what appeared to be an extremely vulnerable moment. Some questioned whether sharing the footage publicly had turned a tragedy into entertainment. Others argued that the video was an important investigative tool that helped bring attention to her disappearance. Both sides reflected a larger question about true crime itself. When does public interest help find answers? And when does it cross into turning someone's suffering into a spectacle? Years after the case, interest returned when documentaries and renewed discussions brought Elisa Lam's story back into the spotlight. The 2021 release that revisited the case introduced new conversations about the evidence, the investigation, and the theories that had surrounded it for years. Many viewers expected a shocking hidden discovery. Instead, the case remained what it had always been. A complicated story built from a mixture of confirmed facts, unanswered questions, human behavior, and the limitations of what anyone could truly know. The elevator footage remained the center of the mystery. A few minutes of video that appeared to show everything, yet explained almost nothing. And perhaps that was why it stayed in people's minds. Because the most unsettling part of Elisa Lam's story was not simply what happened. It was the fact that the final moments of her life were recorded and still left the world searching for meaning.